Hello again. One of the saddest things is to watch older people who are uncertain and confused because the modern world no longer makes sense to them. The institutions and values with which they grew up are crumbling away. They don't understand what's going on around them. Many people in Europe, including leading politicians, are now in this position. They grew up in the Cold War with American troops, American guarantees, American support for Europe through NATO. It was all a fixed constant in the shifting firmament. The Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain. America was always there to reassure us. Now, the President of the United States is threatening to take over the territory of another member of NATO, and these people simply cannot make any sense of it. Doesn't he care any more about NATO and protecting Europe? Doesn't he realise that invading Greenland would precipitate the collapse of NATO and mean that Europe had to fend for itself without Uncle Sam ready and willing to lend a hand? Of course, President Trump realises that, but I doubt if it will stop him from occupying Greenland. He has chosen to make ensuring control of the Western Hemisphere his priority, and this means clearing it of Asian and European influence, even if the European influence is that of an ally. This is the Monroe Doctrine on steroids. Denmark may well be an ally of the United States in the sense that they belong to NATO, but Denmark, whose territory Greenland is, cannot keep the Russians and Chinese out of the Arctic. Only America can do that, and so only America should control that huge island. It is a matter of geopolitical interest for the United States, and the Americans are now ensuring that the Western Hemisphere is entirely under their jurisdiction. They don't want Europeans or Asians of any description poking their noses into South America or the North Atlantic. For viewers who do not understand the Monroe Doctrine, it's simple enough. James Monroe, who became president in 1817, set out what became known as the Monroe Doctrine. This was contained in the annual message to Congress delivered in December 1823 and became the blueprint for American foreign policy for the next, well, right up until the present day, in fact. European countries had at that time a number of colonies in both North and South America, including British possessions such as Jamaica and Spanish ones like Cuba. As a result of a revolt in the Spanish colonies, there was a threat of military intervention from Europe in the early 19th century. President Monroe made it plain that America would not tolerate any interference by European powers in any part of the Americas, and that includes the whole of South America as well. Specifically, it was said that any attempt by a European nation to extend its influence in the Americas would be regarded by the United States as a threat to its own peace and security. The same would apply to the establishment of any new colonies, although America would tolerate those which already existed. An assurance was also given that not only would the United States not involve itself in the affairs of existing European colonies in that part of the world, neither would it participate in any purely European wars. Later, the Monroe Doctrine was, to all intents and purposes, applied to the Pacific. Asian attempts to colonize or interfere in the affairs of any countries too near America were regarded as hostile actions. American involvement in the First and Second World Wars was no violation of the Monroe Doctrine, since American interests were threatened by German U-boat attacks and, of course, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. But it's still a powerful strand in American politics. President Trump has evidently decided that it is time for his country to remind everybody that the Western Hemisphere is and always shall be a purely American sphere of influence, and anybody, even an ally like Denmark, who doesn't realise this had better get with it. It is this new reality, which is really no more than a policy over 200 years old, that a lot of Europeans cannot quite grasp. But surely they cry when they hear about Greenland. America is our friend. Why would they do this? Many older people seem almost shell-shocked. They simply can't keep up with the developments. America boarding that oil tanker near Britain and taking it in defiance of the Russian Navy shows just how rapidly the world is changing. As Tennyson put it, the old order changeth. If anybody wishes to understand this new world, then they would do well to study history, because there is really nothing new about any of this. By the by, I observe that Article 5 has been trending on X, and some folk are claiming that if the United States occupied Greenland, then that would mean that other NATO countries like Britain would be obliged to go to war to defend what is technically Danish territory. That's all a lot of nonsense as well, as a quick look at both the NATO Charter and also what happened in the Eastern Mediterranean in the summer of 1974 will soon show. Article 5 of the NATO Charter states bluntly and unequivocally that an attack against one member shall be considered an attack against them all. Does that mean that if America took over Greenland, that we would be obliged to go to war with America in defense of Denmark? Of course, it means nothing of the kind. Article 5 continues by saying that each member state has an obligation to take such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force, but only if it's deemed necessary. Would we deem it necessary to launch our Trident missiles at the United States if they established military bases in Greenland with no bloodshed, without the permission of Denmark? Would any European country really think that they should attack America in such circumstances? It might mean the ultimate collapse of NATO, but I'm guessing that President Trump has factored that into his calculations. Imagine the possible end of NATO, how the world is changing. Of course, we've been here before when Turkey attacked and occupied a third of Cyprus in 1974, despite the fact that Greece had troops there and practically guaranteed the security of Cyprus. Both Greece and Turkey had been members of NATO since 1952, but the brief war did not affect the alliance in the long term. It's possible that the same would be true of an American invasion of Greenland. As I say, a lot of older people are struggling to make any sense of all this, which is affording me a great deal of amusement. Life is change, and things really are changing at the moment.